My husband had a separate bank account. We were struggling. I found the bank statement while looking for our insurance papers in Mark's desk drawer. Not snooping, I had every right to be there. He'd asked me to find the homeowner's policy after our basement flooded last week, the same flood we supposedly couldn't afford to fix properly. The same flood that had me calling my boss at 2 a.m., begging for extra shifts so we could at least get a dehumidifier. The paper was folded neatly behind a stack of old tax returns. Chase Bank. Account ending in 7429. Balance, $43,847.62. Last transaction, 3 days ago. A deposit of $1,200, exactly the amount of Mark's bi-weekly paycheck that I thought was going entirely to our joint checking account. My hands started shaking. I sat down hard in his desk chair, staring at the numbers like they might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. We'd been married 6 years. We'd opened our joint account on our honeymoon. We'd sworn no financial secrets, not after watching both our parents' marriages implode over hidden debts and secret spending. For 8 months, I'd been working doubles at the hospital. 16-hour shifts that left me so exhausted I'd sometimes sleep in my car in the parking lot rather than drive home. Mark would text me pictures of cereal for dinner with sad face emojis, joking about our ramen noodle era while I grabbed protein bars from the vending machine because the cafeteria was too expensive. I'd sold my grandmother's pearl earrings in March. The ones she'd given me on my wedding day, the ones that had been in our family for 3 generations. They brought $800 at the pawn shop, enough to cover our electric bill and buy groceries for 2 weeks. Mark had held me while I cried that night, stroking my hair and whispering that things would get better soon, that we just needed to stick together. Last month, I'd started taking the bus to work to save gas money. 45 minutes each way on public transportation instead of a 15-minute drive. Mark said he needed the car for job interviews, that he was doing everything he could to find something better than his part-time position at the hardware store. I'd been so proud of him for trying, so guilty for sometimes feeling resentful when I'd see him on the couch watching Netflix during my rare moments at home. The statement was dated 5 days ago. This wasn't some old account he'd forgotten about. This was active. This was deliberate. I heard his key in the front door and quickly shoved the paper back where I'd found it, my heart hammering against my ribs. Babe? Did you find those insurance papers? Mark called out, his voice carrying that same cheerful tone he'd used when telling me we couldn't afford to go to my sister's wedding last month. Still looking, I called back, my voice surprisingly steady. He appeared in the doorway, still wearing his work uniform, looking tired and slightly defeated, the same expression he'd perfected over the past 8 months. The same expression that had made me feel so protective of him, so determined to carry us both through this rough patch. No rush, he said, kissing the top of my head. I picked up a rotisserie chicken for dinner. Figured we could splurge a little. A rotisserie chicken. $4.99. Our idea of splurging. I smiled up at him, and for the first time in months, it felt completely genuine. That sounds perfect, I said. Because I'd just realized exactly what I was going to do with this information. Dinner was surreal. Mark sat across from me, picking at the rotisserie chicken and talking about his day like we were living in the same reality. He complained about his manager giving him grief over being 3 minutes late, rolled his eyes about a difficult customer who couldn't decide between 2 types of screws. Normal husband stuff. Relatable working man struggles. I nodded and made appropriate sounds while mentally calculating that his secret account contained more than I'd made in the last 6 months combined. More than enough to fix our basement, pay off my credit cards, and still have a comfortable emergency fund. More than enough to let me cut back to normal 40-hour weeks instead of the soul-crushing doubles that had me popping caffeine pills just to stay awake during patient rounds. You okay? Mark asked, reaching across to squeeze my hand. You seem distracted. His touch made my skin crawl, but I squeezed back. Just tired. Mrs. Patterson in 314 kept calling all night. You know how it is. He did that sympathetic head tilt that used to make me melt. I'm sorry, babe. I know how hard you've been working. I promise it'll all be worth it once I find something better. The lies came so easily to him. Natural as breathing. After dinner, I excused myself to take a shower, but instead I sat on our bathroom floor with my laptop, using our neighbor's unsecured Wi-Fi to do some research. I couldn't risk Mark seeing the search history on our shared computer. It took me 20 minutes to find what I was looking for. The account had been opened 14 months ago, 2 months before Mark started complaining about money troubles. 2 months before he convinced me we needed to tighten our belts and that his hours had been cut at work. The monthly statements painted a clear picture. Regular deposits, always the same amounts, always timed with his paychecks. He'd been systematically funneling money into this account while watching me work myself into the ground. While watching me skip meals. While holding me as I cried over selling my grandmother's jewelry. But the worst part wasn't the money itself. It was the pattern of deposits that revealed the true timeline. The account balance showed that even during our poorest months, when I'd been donating plasma twice a week for grocery money, he'd been consistently adding to his secret stash. In February, when I'd had to choose between my prescription medication and our gas bill, he deposited $1,800. In April, when I called my mother crying because we couldn't afford Easter dinner, he'd added another $2,200. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Katie. Still can't believe you missed the wedding. Are things really that bad? I stared at her message, remembering how humiliated I'd felt calling her to decline being her maid of honor. How I'd had to explain that we couldn't afford the dress, the hotel, the travel. How she'd offered to help and I'd been too proud to accept, too determined to protect Mark's dignity by not letting my family know how much we were struggling. Except we weren't struggling. I was struggling. Mark was watching me struggle while sitting on a pile of money that could have solved everything. Another text from Katie, Ben's friend works at Chase Bank. Says there are ways to access account info if you're married and have legitimate concerns. Just saying. I screenshotted her message before I could second guess myself. Babe? Mark's voice came through the bathroom door. Everything okay in there? You've been in there for like an hour. Just soaking, I called back. My back's killing me from work. Because I've been pulling 16-hour shifts for months. Because I've been destroying my body to save a marriage that was already over, I just hadn't known it yet. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Mark seemed genuinely concerned, bringing me tea and checking my forehead for fever before he left for his shift at the hardware store. The performance was Oscar-worthy. "I hate leaving you when you're not feeling well," he said, adjusting the blankets around me. "But Jeff's already pissed about me being late yesterday. Can't afford to lose this job." Can't afford. The phrase hit differently now. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I was up and dressed. Katie had texted me Ben's friend's number, someone named Marcus who worked in fraud prevention at Chase. She'd already given him a heads up about my situation. The bank was a 15-minute walk from our house. I'd never noticed it before, despite passing it dozens of times on my way to the bus stop. Funny how invisible things become when you don't think they're relevant to your life. Marcus turned out to be younger than I'd expected, maybe 25, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked genuinely uncomfortable when I explained the situation, confirming what Katie had suspected, that as a spouse, I had certain rights regarding undisclosed accounts, especially if there was evidence of financial deception affecting marital assets. "I have to be honest with you," Marcus said quietly, pulling up Mark's account on his screen. "What I'm seeing here, this isn't good. But before we go any further, you need to understand that once you know everything, you can't unknow it." I thought about Mark's concerned face that morning, his gentle hand on my forehead. Then I thought about the electric bill notice I'd hidden in my purse yesterday, the one threatening disconnection in 5 days. "Show me everything." The full picture was worse than I'd imagined. The secret account wasn't just recent, it went back almost 2 years. Mark had been planning this long before he'd ever mentioned money problems to me. But more damning were the notes attached to certain transactions. Internal memos that Marcus probably shouldn't have been showing me, but his expression suggested he'd seen enough financial abuse cases to know what this was. "See this notation here?" Marcus pointed to a deposit from 13 months ago. "Your husband specifically instructed us not to send statements to your home address. He set up a P.O. box for all correspondence related to this account." A P.O. box. He'd rented a P.O. box to hide money from his wife while she worked herself into exhaustion. "And this," Marcus continued, his voice getting quieter. "These withdrawal patterns. Small amounts, always cash, always from ATMs near your workplace during your shift hours. He's been taking money out when he knew you'd be at the hospital." The timestamps painted a crystal clear picture. Withdrawals at 3 p.m. when I worked days, at 11 p.m. when I worked nights. He'd been accessing his secret fund for months while texting me pictures of his sad cereal dinners. "How much has he withdrawn total?" I asked. Marcus hesitated. "In the past 8 months? About $12,000. 12,000. While I'd been selling my grandmother's jewelry and donating plasma and taking the bus in the rain." "There's something else," Marcus said. "The account has automatic transfer set up. Every time your joint checking gets below a certain threshold, money gets moved from his personal account, but not to the joint account. To a different personal account. He's been monitoring your financial stress and responding to it." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Responding how?" "He increases his personal savings rate when the joint account is struggling. Like he's using your financial pressure as a trigger to save more aggressively for himself." The room started spinning slightly. Mark hadn't just been hiding money from me. He'd been actively profiting from my suffering, using my desperation as motivation to pad his secret account. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark, "Feeling any better, babe? Thinking about you. Love you so much." I showed the message to Marcus, whose expression darkened further. "Mrs. Anderson," he said carefully, "I think you need to talk to a lawyer. Today." I left the bank with a manila folder full of evidence and Marcus's business card tucked into my purse like contraband. The afternoon sun felt too bright, too normal for what I'd just learned. A mother pushed her stroller past me on the sidewalk, talking on the phone about dinner plans. Life continuing as if my entire world hadn't just shifted on its axis. Katie had given me another number, a divorce attorney named Sarah Chen who specialized in financial fraud cases. I called from the parking lot of a McDonald's 3 blocks from the bank, my hands still shaking from the meeting with Marcus. "I can see you at 4:30, Sarah said after I gave her the abbreviated version. "Bring everything you have. Bank statements, tax returns, any documentation of your joint finances." "And Mrs. Anderson?" "Don't go home until after we talk. Don't go home." The place I'd been working myself to death to keep was now somewhere I needed to avoid. I spent the next 3 hours in that McDonald's, nursing a coffee and spreading Marcus's printouts across the sticky table. The patterns were even clearer in daylight. Every time I'd picked up extra shifts, Mark's savings rate increased. When I'd started donating plasma in January, his deposits jumped by 40%. It was like he'd been running some sick experiment, testing how much he could extract from my desperation. The worst discovery was a series of notes from February, the month I'd sold my grandmother's earrings. Marcus had highlighted them for me, his face grim as he explained their significance. Mark had made a large deposit 2 days after I'd come home crying from the pawn shop. But more damning was the notation attached, "Wife unaware of account, maintaining separate financial security." Financial security. While I'd been choosing between medication and groceries. At 4:15, I gathered my papers and drove to Sarah Chen's office in downtown. Her building was glass and steel, the kind of place I'd driven past 1,000 times without thinking I'd ever have reason to be inside. The elevator was filled with people in expensive suits carrying leather briefcases, a different world from the hospital scrubs and sensible shoes that had become my uniform. Sarah Chen was nothing like I'd expected. Petite, probably my age, wearing jeans and a blazer that managed to look both professional and approachable. Her office was warm, filled with plants and family photos instead of the intimidating law books I'd imagined. "Show me what you found," she said simply, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. I spread out Marcus's printouts like evidence at a crime scene. Sarah studied them in silence for several minutes, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. Her expression grew more serious with each page. "This is systematic financial abuse," she said finally. "What your husband has been doing isn't just hiding money, it's a deliberate pattern of psychological manipulation using economic control." The clinical terms made it real in a way that hurt more than the betrayal itself. "The automatic transfer triggers that increase his savings when your joint account struggles? That's particularly damaging." It shows premeditation and an intentional decision to profit from your financial distress. She leaned back in her chair, studying my face. Can I ask you something? Has he been encouraging you to work more? Suggesting extra shifts or additional income sources? The memory hit me like a slap. March, when I'd been exhausted from pulling doubles all week. Mark had brought me coffee in bed and told me how proud he was of my work ethic, how much he admired my commitment to our future. That same week, he deposited $2,400 into his secret account. He has, I whispered. That's what I thought. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. Mrs. Anderson, your husband has been systematically exploiting your love for him to fund his personal savings account. This isn't a marriage, it's financial servitude. I drove home in a daze, Sarah's words echoing in my head. Financial servitude. She'd made it sound so clinical, so obvious, but sitting in my driveway looking at our little blue house with its sagging porch and peeling paint, the house I'd been killing myself to keep, it still felt impossible. Mark's car was already there. He was home early. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at the manila folder in my passenger seat. Sarah had given me homework, document everything over the next few days. Take pictures of bills, gather evidence of our joint expenses, and whatever I did, don't confront him yet. You only get one shot at this, she'd said. If he knows you know, he'll move the money. Men like your husband always have an exit strategy. My phone rang. Mark. Hey babe, saw you pull up. You coming in? I made soup. Made soup. Like he was some caring husband tending to his sick wife, not a man who'd been systematically draining my life force for sport. Be right there, I managed. He met me at the door with an actual thermometer, pressing the back of his hand to my forehead with exaggerated concern. You still look pale. Good thing you stayed home today. The performance was flawless. If I hadn't spent the afternoon learning the truth about our finances, I would have melted into his arms, grateful for his attention. Instead, I had to resist the urge to ask him if caring for sick wives was covered in whatever manual he'd been following. How was work? I asked, settling onto the couch while he bustled around the kitchen. Terrible. Jeff's being a complete ass about everything. Makes me want to quit, but... He gestured vaguely at our surroundings. Can't afford to right now. Can't afford to. While sitting on $43,000. I've been thinking, he continued, bringing me a bowl of Campbell's chicken noodle. Maybe you should ask Dr. Martinez about picking up some of those weekend shifts in the ICU. I know you're tired, but the overtime pay would really help us get ahead. There it was. Sarah had been right. He was actively encouraging me to work more, even while pretending to worry about my health. I wondered how much he'd planned to deposit after my next paycheck. I don't know, Mark. I'm pretty burned out. His face shifted slightly, just for a second, and I caught a glimpse of something that looked almost like annoyance before the concerned husband mask slipped back into place. Of course, babe. Your health comes first. We'll figure something else out. But I could practically see the calculations running behind his eyes. If I didn't pick up extra shifts, he'd need another way to maintain his savings rate. Maybe he'd suggest I sell something else. Maybe he'd find new expenses to justify. After dinner, while Mark was in the shower, I snuck back into his desk. This time I knew exactly what I was looking for. The bank statements only told part of the story. I needed to understand the whole scope of his deception. I found it in a folder labeled Tax Stuff 2019, completely mislabeled, which I now realized was probably intentional. Inside were statements from not just the Chase account, but two others. A savings account at Wells Fargo with $18,000. And a money market account at First National with another $12,000. My legs gave out. I sank into his desk chair, staring at the numbers. $73,000. Mark had $73,000 hidden from me while I'd been donating plasma for grocery money. But the real gut punch was the letter clipped to the First National statements. It was from a financial advisor, dated 6 weeks ago, congratulating Mark on his disciplined approach to building wealth and outlining investment strategies for his continued financial independence. Financial independence. From his wife. The letter went on to discuss Mark's goals of having a 6-month emergency fund completely separate from household expenses and his interest in maintaining financial autonomy within marriage. There it was in black and white. This wasn't accidental or temporary. Mark had been deliberately and methodically building a secret financial life, with professional help, while watching me sacrifice everything for what I thought was our shared struggle. I heard the shower turn off upstairs and quickly photographed everything with my phone before shoving the papers back into the folder. By the time Mark came down in his pajamas, I was back on the couch, innocently scrolling through Netflix. Feeling any better? He asked, settling beside me and pulling me against his chest. His arms around me felt like a trap now. I thought about Sarah's words, financial servitude. I thought about the advisor's letter talking about Mark's financial independence. And I realized that tomorrow, I was going to start building some independence of my own. The next morning, Mark was extra attentive. He brought me coffee in bed again, checked my temperature with the back of his hand, and insisted I take another sick day. You're still looking peaked, he said, adjusting the pillows behind me. Besides, I heard there's a stomach bug going around. Better safe than sorry. I almost laughed. He wanted me home, probably worried I'd been acting strange yesterday. Or maybe he just enjoyed the performance of playing the devoted husband while I was trapped and vulnerable. Actually, I'm feeling much better, I said, sitting up. I think I should go in. We're short-staffed, Anne. No. His voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. I mean, no, babe. You need rest. Money isn't worth your health. There was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Something calculating. It lasted maybe half a second before the concerned husband mask slipped back on, but I'd caught it. Okay, I said quietly. You're probably right. He kissed my forehead, lingering longer than usual, like he was trying to read my temperature through my skin. I'll bring you lunch on my break, okay? Chicken soup and crackers. After he left, I called Dr. Martinez and told her I needed to use a personal day. Then I called Sarah Chin. I found more accounts, I said without preamble. 73,000 total. And a letter from a financial advisor about Mark building financial independence for me. Jesus, Sarah breathed. Can you get me copies of everything today? He wanted me to stay home. I think he suspects something. Then we need to move faster than I'd planned. Can you meet me at 11? There's something I need to show you. Sarah's office felt different this time. More urgent. She had papers spread across her desk and a laptop open to what looked like a legal database. I did some research after you left yesterday, she said, gesturing for me to sit. Your husband isn't just hiding money, Mrs. Anderson. He's been building a legal case for separate property in case of divorce. My blood turned to ice. What do you mean? The systematic nature of his savings, the separate accounts with specific documentation, the advisor's letter about financial autonomy, this is textbook preparation for asset protection in divorce proceedings. He's been planning an exit strategy. Sarah pulled up a document on her laptop. I also ran a credit check on him yesterday with your permission. Did you know he opened a credit card 3 months ago? Exclusively in his name, different address. What address? A P.O. box. The same one linked to his bank accounts. She turned the laptop toward me. He's been building an entirely separate financial identity. New credit lines, investment accounts, even a safe deposit box you're not listed on. The room started spinning. He's planning to divorce me. I think he's been planning to divorce you for months, maybe longer. But first, he wanted to maximize his secret assets while minimizing his responsibility for marital debt. Sarah's voice was gentle but clinical. The extra shifts he's been encouraging you to work? The more debt you rack up trying to cover household expenses while he saves, the better his position becomes in a settlement. I thought about all those nights I'd come home exhausted to find Mark waiting with dinner and sympathy, asking about my day, encouraging me to push through just a little longer. I thought he was being supportive. He'd been building a legal strategy. There's more, Sarah continued. The timing of his deposits shows he's been monitoring your work schedule obsessively. Every time you worked a double, he moved money. Every time you picked up extra shifts, his savings increased proportionally. He's been using your sacrifice as a signal to accelerate his exit plan. She pulled out another document. This is the real kicker. 3 weeks ago, he consulted with Davidson and Associates. They're the most aggressive divorce attorneys in the city. The consultation fee was charged to his secret credit card. 3 weeks ago. Right around the time I'd mentioned being so tired I could barely think straight. When he'd held me and promised things would get better soon. He's going to serve you papers, probably soon, Sarah said. And when he does, he'll claim all his secret savings as separate property while sticking you with the marital debt you accumulated trying to keep your household afloat. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. How are you feeling, sweetheart? Can't wait to bring you lunch. Love you so much. I showed Sarah the message. She read it and shook her head. Mrs. Anderson, I need you to understand something. Your husband isn't just stealing from you, he's been orchestrating your financial destruction while positioning himself as the victim. This is one of the most calculated cases I've ever seen. I stared at Mark's text, at those 3 little words that had once meant everything to me. What do we do? Sarah's smile was razor sharp. We beat him at his own game. The plan Sarah outlined was beautiful in its simplicity. Since we were legally married, I had rights to the marital assets Mark had been hiding, including the ability to access those accounts under certain circumstances. More importantly, since he'd been systematically defrauding me, I could legally protect myself by securing those assets before he could move them offshore or claim them as separate property. The key is documentation and speed, Sarah explained, sliding a thick folder across her desk. We're going to file an emergency motion for asset preservation, but first we need to secure the money before he realizes what's happening. She'd already contacted Marcus at Chase, who'd agreed to help coordinate the transfers. Apparently, what Mark had been doing was textbook financial abuse, and banks had protocols for helping victims secure fraudulently hidden assets. Tomorrow morning, while he's at work, you're going to transfer every penny from his secret accounts to pay off the marital debts he's been forcing you to accumulate, Sarah said. Credit cards, medical bills, the basement repair fund, everything. When he comes home, the debts will be gone and so will his exit strategy. My hands were shaking as I signed the paperwork authorizing the transfers. What if he finds out before we can do this? That's why we're moving fast. Tonight, you act completely normal. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., Marcus will execute the transfers. By the time Mark gets his first account alert, it'll be too late to stop. I drove home with Sarah's instructions memorized and a flash drive full of evidence hidden in my purse. Act normal. Pretend to be sick. Let him think his plan was working perfectly. Mark was already in the driveway when I pulled up, sitting in his car with a brown bag from the deli down the street. He'd actually brought me lunch, just like he'd promised. The devoted husband performance continued. You were gone, he said as I approached his window. There was something different in his voice, not quite accusatory, but definitely not trusting. I felt better, so I went for a drive, I said. Fresh air seemed to help. His eyes searched my face like he was looking for something specific. Where did you go? The question felt loaded. Dangerous, even. Just around the neighborhood. Stopped at CVS for some throat lozenges. I pulled a bag of Ricola from my pocket. I'd actually bought them as a prop, thinking ahead to this exact moment. Mark's expression relaxed slightly. Good thinking. Come on, let's get you fed. Inside, he unpacked chicken noodle soup and saltines with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Had he? Had there been other women he'd systematically destroyed while playing the caring partner? The thought made me nauseous. Mark, I said carefully, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. About the ICU shifts. His head snapped up from the soup container. Yeah? Maybe I should talk to Dr. Martinez. We really do need the money, and I'm feeling stronger today. The transformation was instant. His whole face lit up like I'd just told him he'd won the lottery. Which, in a way, I suppose I had, more opportunities for me to work myself to death while he padded his secret accounts. Are you sure, babe? I don't want you pushing yourself too hard. But his eyes were already calculating. I could practically see him running the numbers, figuring out how much extra he could save if I picked up weekend shifts in the ICU. I'm sure, I said. Besides, maybe if I work some overtime, we could finally afford to fix the basement properly. That would be amazing, Mark said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. His lips felt like ice against my skin. We spent the afternoon watching Netflix, Mark playing the attentive nurse while I pretended to rest. But I could feel him watching me during the quiet moments, studying my face when he thought I wasn't looking. Something had changed in his behavior since yesterday, a subtle shift that made my skin crawl. At 7 p.m., his phone buzzed with a text. He read it and immediately stood up. I need to run out for a bit, he said. Hardware store stuff. Jeff wants me to pick up some inventory reports. Jeff. His manager. The same manager he'd been complaining about for months, the one who supposedly had it out for him. I wondered if Jeff even existed, or if he was just another character in Mark's elaborate fiction. On a weeknight? I asked. Yeah, it's weird, I know. But he's being extra demanding lately. Probably won't take long. After he left, I sat in our living room looking at everything differently. The couch where I'd collapsed after 16-hour shifts while Mark secretly counted his money. The TV we supposedly couldn't afford to replace, even though he had enough in hidden accounts to buy 10 of them. The wedding photos on the mantle, smiling faces from a ceremony that apparently meant nothing to the man who'd promised to love and cherish me. My phone rang. Sarah. Change of plans, she said without preamble. I just heard from a contact at Davidson and Associates. Mark moved up his timeline. He's filing for divorce tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Tomorrow morning. The exact time we planned to transfer his money. Sarah, he just left the house. Said he had to run errands for work, but he's probably meeting with his lawyer right now, finalizing the paperwork. Mrs. Anderson, we need to move tonight. The bank was closed, but Marcus had given me his personal cell number for exactly this situation. When I called, he answered on the second ring. I was wondering when I'd hear from you, he said grimly. I've been monitoring the accounts since this afternoon. Your husband made 3 large cash withdrawals today, totaling $8,000. My stomach dropped. He's liquidating. It looks that way. But here's the thing, he can't move the money out of the main accounts without triggering fraud alerts, especially not the large amounts. The cash withdrawals are probably just walking around money for whatever he's planning. Sarah was on a 3-way call now, her voice sharp with urgency. Marcus, can we execute the transfers tonight? Emergency circumstances? I'll need Mrs. Anderson to come to the bank. I can meet her there in 20 minutes. We can process this as an emergency spousal protection action, but she'll need to sign everything in person. After I hung up, I sat in Mark's desk chair, staring at the folder of statements I'd photographed. $8,000 in cash. That wasn't running money, that was hiring money. Payment for something that needed to happen before tomorrow morning. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Detective Sarah Chen's paralegal. She asked me to inform you that Davidson and Associates filed an emergency ex parte motion this evening seeking to freeze all marital assets pending tomorrow's divorce filing. You need to move now. Ex parte. That meant Mark's lawyer had gone to a judge without telling me, asking to freeze our accounts so I couldn't access any money while the divorce proceeded. If that motion was granted tomorrow morning, I'd be locked out of everything, including my own paycheck. I was gathering my keys when I heard Mark's car in the driveway. My heart hammered against my ribs as I quickly shoved the bank statements back into his desk and rushed to the couch, grabbing the TV remote like I'd been watching the whole time. He came through the front door carrying a manila envelope and looking grimmer than I'd ever seen him. Gone was the concerned husband from this afternoon. This was someone else entirely, someone colder, more focused. How are you feeling? He asked, but his voice was mechanical. Distracted. Better. I think I'll definitely go to work tomorrow. He nodded absently, already moving toward his desk. That's good. Listen, I might be late getting home tomorrow night. Work stuff. Work stuff. While serving me divorce papers and activating his plan to steal everything we'd supposedly built together. Mark? I called out as he disappeared into his office. Everything okay? You seem stressed. Just tired, he called back, but I could hear him opening drawers, shuffling papers. I pretended to watch TV while listening to him move around his office. After 20 minutes, he emerged with a small duffel bag I'd never seen before. I'm going to bed early, he announced. Big day tomorrow. He kissed the top of my head, but it felt perfunctory. Final, somehow. Sweet dreams, I whispered, the words tasting like poison. I waited until I heard his breathing deepen into sleep, then crept out of the house through the back door. Marcus was waiting in the bank parking lot, looking as grim as I felt. Your husband cleaned out the safe deposit box this afternoon, he said as we walked toward the employee entrance. Whatever he had stored there, it's gone. Inside the empty bank, surrounded by dark teller windows and the hum of security equipment, Marcus pulled up Mark's accounts on his computer. The good news is the main accounts are still intact, he said. 43,000 at Chase, 18,000 at Wells Fargo, 12,000 at First National. The bad news is there are pending transfer authorizations that will execute at market open tomorrow. He's trying to move everything to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Offshore. Of course. How long do we have? Marcus checked his watch. Market opens at 6 a.m. Pacific. We have exactly 7 hours and 43 minutes to beat him to it. Sarah arrived 10 minutes later with a briefcase full of legal documents and the authorization paperwork I needed to sign. Her face was pale but determined. The ex parte motion was denied, she said as I signed my name over and over again. The judge said there wasn't sufficient evidence of asset dissipation to justify freezing everything without notice to you. But Mark doesn't know that yet, I realized. Exactly. He thinks he's got you locked out, so he won't be expecting this. Marcus's fingers flew over his keyboard, executing transfer after transfer. 43,000 from Chase, applied directly to my maxed out credit cards. 18,000 from Wells Fargo, straight to the medical bills from my exhaustion-related doctor visits. 12,000 from First National, earmarked for the basement repairs and home maintenance we've been deferring for months. It's done, Marcus said quietly. Every account is now at zero balance. The offshore transfers will fail tomorrow morning due to insufficient funds. I stared at the computer screen showing Mark's empty accounts. $73,000 that he'd stolen from our marriage, now used exactly as it should have been all along, to pay for the life we'd supposedly been building together. Mrs. Anderson, Sarah said softly, there's one more thing. I think you should stay somewhere else tonight. I stared at Sarah, my keys still clutched in my sweaty palm. What do you mean, stay somewhere else? The cash withdrawals, the sudden timeline change, the overnight bag he packed, Sarah's voice was carefully controlled. In my experience, when men like your husband realize they're about to lose control of their financial manipulation, they can become unpredictable. Marcus nodded grimly from behind his computer. I've seen this pattern before in financial abuse cases. The victim starts showing signs of independence, and the abuser escalates. Your husband went from systematic long-term planning to emergency cash withdrawals in a single day. That's not rational behavior. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark, can't sleep. Where are you? The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m. I'd been at the bank for over 2 hours, but it felt like minutes. My hands started shaking as I typed back, couldn't sleep either. Getting some air on the back porch. 3 dots appeared immediately. He was awake, actively texting at 3 a.m. Getting worried. Come back to bed. How did he know I was gone? I whispered, showing them the messages. Sarah's face darkened. He's been checking on you. Probably set an alarm to make sure you were still there. Another text, I walked through the house. You're not here. Where are you? The pretense was dropping. No more babe or sweetheart. Just cold demand for information. Answer him, Sarah said quickly. Tell him you went for a drive because you couldn't sleep. Buy us time to get you somewhere safe. I typed with trembling fingers, went for a drive. Feeling anxious. Be home soon. This time the response was immediate, come home now. We need to talk. He knows, I breathed. Somehow he knows what we did. Marcus was already pulling up real-time account activity. The offshore transfer attempts started processing an hour ago, even though they won't complete until market open. He might have gotten failure notifications. Sarah grabbed my arm. We're leaving. Now. Marcus, can you print everything we just did? Transaction records, account closures, all of it? As the printer whirred to life, my phone rang. Mark's contact photo filled the screen, a picture from our anniversary dinner 2 months ago, back when I thought we were struggling together instead of him systematically destroying me. Answer it, Sarah mouthed. Act normal. Hey, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Where the fuck are you? The words hit me like a slap. Mark had never, not once in 6 years, spoken to me like that. I told you, I went for a drive. Don't lie to me. Your car's been gone for 3 hours. I checked the mileage. He'd been tracking my car. The man who'd held me while I cried about selling my grandmother's jewelry had been monitoring my movements like a parole officer. Mark, you're scaring me. I'm scaring you? His laugh was harsh, unfamiliar. You have no idea what scared looks like yet. Get home. Now. The line went dead. Sarah was already pulling me toward the exit, Marcus's printouts clutched in her free hand. My car's outside. We're going to my office, and then we're calling the police. The police? But we didn't do anything illegal. No, but I think he might be about to. As we pushed through the bank's heavy glass doors, my phone exploded with notifications. Text after text, the tone shifting from demanding to pleading to threatening in the span of seconds. I know what you did. We can fix this. You have no idea what you've done to us. Come home and we'll talk like adults. You're making a huge mistake. I trusted you. The last message made me stop walking. I'm coming to find you. Sarah saw my face and grabbed my phone, scrolling through the messages. Her expression grew more alarmed with each one. Definitely calling the police, she said, already dialing with her free hand. And we're not going to my office. We're going straight to the station. As her car pulled out of the bank parking lot, I looked back at the building where I'd just reclaimed my life. In 6 hours, Mark would wake up expecting to destroy me with divorce papers and find his secret empire reduced to zero. But first, apparently, we had to survive the night. The police station at 3:30 a.m. was a fluorescent-lit purgatory of domestic disputes and drunk drivers. Sarah had called ahead, explaining the situation to Detective Rodriguez, who met us at the front desk looking like he'd seen this particular brand of financial abuse nightmare too many times. The threatening messages definitely qualify for a restraining order, he said, reviewing the screenshots Sarah had taken of Mark's texts. But I have to be honest with you, Mrs. Anderson, until he actually does something physical, our hands are pretty tied. I thought about Mark's voice on the phone, that cold fury I'd never heard before. What about the financial fraud? He stole $73,000 from our marriage. Detective Rodriguez's expression was sympathetic but realistic. Technically, as your husband, he had legal access to his own income. The hidden accounts are definitely grounds for divorce proceedings, but criminally? It's murky territory. Sarah leaned forward in her plastic chair. What about the threats? I'm coming to find you sounds pretty clear to me. We can file a report and start the restraining order process, but it won't be active until morning. Best I can do tonight is have a patrol car drive by your house, make sure he's staying put. My phone had been buzzing continuously for the past hour. Mark's messages had evolved from angry to desperate to something that felt almost calculating. The latest batch was particularly unsettling. I talked to my lawyer. What you did tonight was theft. You can't just steal money from my personal accounts. I'm protecting both of us by stopping this before you do something really stupid. Sarah Chen is a divorce shark. She's using you. Come home and we'll figure this out together. Like we always do. The last message had come in 5 minutes ago. I drove by the bank. Security footage shows everything. You committed a felony tonight. Detective Rodriguez read that one and frowned. He's trying to intimidate you with legal threats he can't back up. The transfers you made were completely legal, spousal rights to marital assets. But the fact that he's already been to the bank. He checked his watch. At 4 a.m.? That's concerning behavior. Sarah's phone rang. She answered it, stepping away from our little circle, but I could hear her side of the conversation getting increasingly tense. What do you mean he's there now? She said. It's 4 in the morning. No, absolutely do not let him access her credit report. I don't care what he's claiming. She hung up and turned back to us, her face grim. That was the 24-hour customer service line at Chase. Mark showed up at an ATM location with a branch manager he somehow contacted directly. He's trying to reverse the transfers, claiming you were coerced into making them. Can he do that? I asked. Not legally, but he's apparently very persuasive. And he brought documentation, printouts showing his consulting with Davidson and Associates, bank records going back 2 years, even character references from people at his work. Detective Rodriguez looked up sharply. Character references? At 4 a.m.? That's what I thought, Sarah said. This level of preparation, the immediate response to the account transfers, he had contingency plans. Multiple levels of them. My blood turned to ice as the implications sank in. Mark hadn't just been hiding money and planning a divorce. He'd been preparing for the possibility that I might fight back. The cash withdrawals, the overnight bag, the immediate legal response, he'd gamed out scenarios where I discovered his deception. How long has he been planning this? I whispered. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed us a screenshot she'd taken at the bank. It was from Mark's calendar app, which had synced to his computer when Marcus pulled up his account information. The entry was dated 8 months ago, right around the time I'd started working double shifts, contingency protocols if S discovers accounts. S. Not even my full name. Just an initial, like I was a problem to be managed rather than a person he'd supposedly loved. He's been planning for you to find out, Sarah said quietly. This was never about hiding the money forever. It was about controlling exactly when and how you discovered it, so he could manage your response. Detective Rodriguez was already reaching for his radio. I'm calling for that patrol car to swing by your house right now. And Mrs. Anderson? You're not going anywhere alone until we figure out what game your husband is really playing. The patrol car's report came back 20 minutes later. Our house was empty, Mark's car was gone, and the front door was standing wide open. Wide open. I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. He never leaves doors unlocked. He checks them 3 times before bed. Detective Rodriguez exchanged a look with Sarah that made my stomach clench. Could be he left in a hurry. Or he didn't finish the sentence, but I could fill in the blanks. Or he wanted us to know he'd been there. Or he'd taken something he needed. Or he was sending a message. We need to do a welfare check, Rodriguez said into his radio. Full sweep of the residence, look for signs of disturbance or missing items. Sarah gripped my hand as we waited for the callback. Her phone kept buzzing with emails. Apparently Mark's middle-of-the-night banking crusade had triggered fraud alerts across multiple institutions. Each notification felt like another shoe dropping. He's been busy, she muttered, scrolling through her messages. Dispute claims filed with Chase, Wells Fargo, and First National. All within the last hour. He's claiming identity theft and coercive fraud. Identity theft? I stared at her. I'm his wife. He's arguing that someone else used your credentials to access his accounts without your knowledge. Basically claiming you were manipulated by outside parties, meaning me, into committing financial crimes you didn't understand. Detective Rodriguez looked up from his notepad. That's actually a pretty sophisticated legal strategy. If he can prove coercion or diminished capacity, he might be able to reverse the transfers and paint himself as a victim. The absurdity hit me like a physical blow. After months of systematic manipulation and financial abuse, Mark was positioning himself as the victim of my supposed crime spree. While I'd been working myself into exhaustion, he'd been building a legal fortress designed to protect him from consequences. There's more, Sarah continued, her voice getting tighter. He's filed for an emergency protective order against you. Claims you've become erratic and destructive, that he fears for his safety. A protective order against me? It's a preemptive strike. If a judge grants it tomorrow morning, you'll be legally barred from accessing any shared accounts, credit cards, even your own paycheck if it's deposited into joint accounts. You'll also be prohibited from contacting him or coming within 500 feet of your own house. The room started spinning slightly. In the span of 6 hours, I'd gone from discovering my husband's betrayal to potentially being homeless and financially cut off, all while he claimed to be protecting himself from my dangerous behavior. Rodriguez's radio crackled to life. Detective, you need to hear this. The house isn't just empty, it's been cleaned out. Systematically. All the financial documents are gone, both computers missing, even the filing cabinet is empty. But here's the weird part, he left a note. What kind of note? Addressed to his wife. Says he's sorry it came to this, that he tried to build a secure future for both of them, but her actions tonight proved she wasn't ready for adult financial responsibility. He's gone somewhere safe to think, and he'll be in touch through lawyers only from now on. Adult financial responsibility. While I'd been selling family heirlooms and donating plasma, Mark had been lecturing me through a note about financial maturity. Sarah was already pulling up legal databases on her phone. The protective order hearing is scheduled for 9 a.m., same time as his original divorce filing. He's going to walk into that courtroom with evidence of your erratic behavior, documented concerns about your mental state, and a sob story about his wife stealing his life savings in the middle of the night. But we have evidence of his abuse, which he'll claim was legitimate financial planning that you discovered and misinterpreted due to stress-induced paranoia. Mrs. Anderson, your husband has been building this narrative for months. Every time he encouraged you to work extra shifts, every worried comment about your exhaustion, every gentle suggestion that you were pushing yourself too hard, it all supports his story that you'd become unstable. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as the full scope of Mark's manipulation crystallized. He hadn't just been stealing money, he'd been crafting a legal and psychological narrative where I was the unstable, financially irresponsible spouse who'd finally snapped under pressure. My own exhaustion and desperation, the direct result of his abuse, would now be used as evidence of my unfitness. Detective Rodriguez closed his notepad with a snap. Mrs. Anderson, we need to find your husband before that hearing. Because something tells me the man who planned all this isn't done playing games. At 6 a.m., Detective Rodriguez's phone rang with news that made my blood freeze. Mark had been spotted at First National Bank's main branch downtown, not as a customer, but in a meeting with the branch president and what appeared to be federal investigators. Federal investigators? Sarah's coffee cup clattered against the station's break room table. What could possibly warrant federal involvement? Rodriguez was already pulling on his jacket. Wire fraud, potentially. If your husband can prove the transfers crossed state lines or involved interstate banking networks under false pretenses, this becomes an FBI matter. My hands started shaking as the implications hit me. He's trying to make this a federal crime, with me as the criminal. It gets worse, Rodriguez continued, checking his weapon. The meeting was scheduled for 6 a.m. sharp. Your husband didn't just react to the account transfers, he anticipated them. He had federal investigators on standby. Sarah's face had gone completely white. That's impossible. You can't just call the FBI at 4 in the morning and get a meeting by 6. No, but you can if you filed a preliminary complaint weeks ago claiming your spouse was showing signs of financial instability and you were concerned about potential fraud. Set up a flag on the accounts, establish a timeline of erratic behavior, then wait for something to trigger federal involvement. The coffee I'd been sipping turned to acid in my stomach. Mark hadn't just planned for me to discover his accounts, he'd planned for me to try to access them, knowing it would trigger the federal fraud protocols he'd already set in motion. How long has he been planning this level? I whispered. Rodriguez's radio buzzed with an update that made his expression even grimmer. Detective, we've got more intel on the federal meeting. Turns out Anderson filed initial complaints with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit 6 weeks ago. Claims his wife had been acting erratically about money, talking about taking what's rightfully hers, showing signs of financial desperation that concerned him. 6 weeks ago. Right around the time I'd mentioned feeling overwhelmed by our debt load and wondering if we had any other options. What I thought was a private conversation between spouses had apparently been evidence gathering for Mark's federal case. There's something else, the radio continued. The investigators are requesting Mrs. Anderson's employment records from the hospital, specifically looking for patterns of overtime that might indicate financial desperation or substance abuse issues. Substance abuse? I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. I've never used drugs in my life. Sarah grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. He doesn't need to prove you were using drugs. He just needs to establish that your behavior was erratic enough to suggest impaired judgment. Excessive overtime, skipping meals, exhaustion, selling personal items, to an outside observer, those could indicate addiction issues. Rodriguez was already heading toward the door. We need to get to that bank. If the FBI formally opens an investigation based on his complaints, they'll freeze all the accounts pending review, including your legitimate paycheck and any money you used for actual household expenses. As we rushed toward the parking garage, my phone buzzed with a notification that made me stop dead in my tracks. It was an email from my hospital's HR department, timestamped 6:23 a.m. Mrs. Anderson, we've received a request for employment records from federal investigators. Please contact the HR office immediately regarding a potential administrative review. They're going after my job, I breathed, showing Sarah the email. Smart, she said grimly, though there was no admiration in her voice. If they can establish that your work performance was declining due to personal stress, it supports the narrative of impaired judgment. Plus, if you lose your job during the investigation, you become completely financially dependent on whatever the court decides about marital assets. Detective Rodriguez's car tires squealed as we pulled out of the parking garage. Through his radio, we could hear real-time updates from the bank. Mark was presenting what appeared to be months of documentation to the federal investigators, including recordings of phone conversations where I'd apparently sounded increasingly desperate about money. Recordings. He'd been recording our private conversations for months, collecting evidence of my financial stress to support his federal fraud case. How is this legal? I asked, watching downtown buildings blur past the window. Spousal recordings are admissible in federal investigations under certain circumstances, Sarah replied, her voice tight with fury. Especially if one party claims they were gathering evidence of potential criminal activity to protect themselves. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. Hello, sweetheart, Mark said, his tone sickeningly gentle. I think it's time we talked. The sound of Mark's voice made my entire body go cold. Detective Rodriguez immediately gestured for me to put the call on speaker while Sarah frantically pulled out her phone to start recording. Mark, I managed, surprised by how steady I sounded. Where are you? Somewhere safe, he said, and I could hear traffic in the background. I have to say, I'm impressed. I didn't think you had it in you to pull off something this elaborate. Working with that shark lawyer, moving money in the middle of the night, very sophisticated for someone who couldn't figure out how to balance our checkbook 6 months ago. The condescension in his voice was breathtaking. Even now, even after everything, he was talking to me like I was a child who'd gotten into the medicine cabinet. You stole from our marriage, Mark. $73,000 while I was working myself to death. Stole? His laugh was sharp. Sweetheart, I earned every penny of that money. What you did last night, that was theft. Federal investigators tend to take a dim view of wire fraud, especially when it involves coercion and diminished capacity. Detective Rodriguez was making sharp gestures, encouraging me to keep him talking. Through the car's radio, I could hear updates from the bank. The federal meeting was still ongoing, but Mark clearly wasn't there anymore. Diminished capacity? I repeated. Mark, you systematically hid money from me for over a year. You watched me sell my grandmother's jewelry. I watched you make poor financial decisions because you were too proud to have an adult conversation about our budget, he interrupted smoothly. Do you have any idea how many times I tried to talk to you about money management? About building savings? But you were always too tired, too stressed, too overwhelmed to discuss our financial future rationally. Sarah was typing furiously on her phone, pulling up something that made her eyes widen. She showed me the screen, Mark's social media activity from the past 6 months. Posts about supporting a spouse through financial stress, sharing articles about recognizing signs of financial anxiety in loved ones, even a few sympathetic comments about how hard it was to watch someone you love make self-destructive choices. He'd been building his public narrative for months. The federal investigators were very interested in your recent behavior patterns, Mark continued conversationally. The excessive overtime, the paranoid accusations, the middle-of-the-night financial transfers. They've seen this kind of escalation before in cases involving substance abuse or mental health crises. I don't have substance abuse or mental health issues. I snapped, then immediately regretted taking the bait. Of course not, sweetheart. But stress can make people behave in ways that look like those things to outside observers. The important thing now is getting you help before you do something that can't be undone. Rodriguez was frantically signaling something to Sarah, who nodded and started typing on her phone. Through his radio, a new voice crackled, "Detective, we've got a problem. Anderson isn't just meeting with federal investigators, he's filed a 72-hour psychiatric hold request. Claims his wife is in immediate danger of harming herself or others due to financial psychosis." A psychiatric hold. My blood turned to ice. If a judge granted that request, I could be involuntarily committed for mental health evaluation, during which time Mark would have complete control over all financial decisions and legal proceedings. "Mark," I said carefully, "what exactly do you want?" "I want my wife back," he said, and for a moment his voice sounded almost genuine. "The woman I married, not this paranoid stranger who breaks into bank accounts and trusts divorce lawyers more than her own husband. Come to St. Mary's Hospital, voluntarily. Check yourself in for a psychiatric evaluation. Show the investigators that you recognize you need help. And if I don't? Then they'll pick you up anyway, but it won't look voluntary. And voluntary cooperation goes a long way toward convincing federal prosecutors that someone made mistakes due to illness rather than criminal intent." The car had stopped. We were in the hospital parking lot, not St. Mary's, but General, where I worked. Where my colleagues would soon hear that I was under federal investigation for financial crimes. Sarah grabbed my arm, her voice urgent, "Don't you dare agree to anything. A psychiatric hold right now would be devastating to your legal position." But Mark had heard her. "Still letting Sarah Chen make your decisions, I see. Ask her something for me, sweetheart. Ask her how many of her divorced clients end up bankrupt and alone after she's done helping them." The line went dead. Detective Rodriguez's radio immediately exploded with activity. "All units, we have a bolo for Mark Anderson. White male, 31 years old, driving a blue Honda Civic. Consider him potentially dangerous and do not approach alone. He's just filed emergency petitions in federal court that could result in immediate warrants." I stared at my phone, at the innocent contact photo of a man I'd loved for 6 years. The man who was now systematically destroying my life with the precision of a military operation. How did I never see this? I whispered. Sarah's expression was grim but determined. "Because he's very, very good at what he does. But here's the thing, so am I." Sarah's phone lit up with an incoming call from Marcus at Chase Bank. She answered immediately, her face growing more serious with each passing second. "They what?" she said sharply. "How is that even possible?" Detective Rodriguez pulled into a parking spot, keeping his radio volume up as dispatch continued coordinating the search for Mark. I could hear my own name being repeated across multiple channels, along with phrases like federal warrant pending and psychiatric evaluation ordered. "Marcus, slow down," Sarah was saying. "Explain to me exactly what documentation he provided." She put the call on speaker. Marcus's voice was tight with frustration. The federal investigators had a court order signed at 6:47 a.m. by Judge Patterson. It authorizes immediate reversal of all transfers made from accounts ending in 7429, 8331, and 9156 pending investigation of fraudulent activity. My stomach dropped. That's all 3 of Mark's hidden accounts. It gets worse, Marcus continued. The court order also freezes your personal checking account, your hospital paycheck direct deposit, and authorizes seizure of any assets purchased with what they're calling illegally transferred funds. "Mrs. Anderson, they're treating you like a money launderer." Detective Rodriguez leaned toward the phone. "Marcus, this is Detective Rodriguez. What kind of timeline are we looking at here? The reversals are processing now. Should be complete within 2 hours. But here's the thing, when that money gets transferred back to Mr. Anderson's accounts, it's going to leave Mrs. Anderson liable for all the debts that were just paid off. Credit cards, medical bills, everything. She'll owe $73,000 with no access to any funds to pay it." Sarah was already pulling up something on her phone. "Marcus, who signed the court order? Judge Patterson shouldn't have jurisdiction over a domestic dispute." "That's just it, this isn't being processed as a domestic dispute anymore. It's a federal financial crimes case. Judge Patterson handles white-collar crime, and according to the documentation Mr. Anderson provided, his wife has been systematically stealing from him for months while showing signs of severe psychological distress." "What documentation?" I asked, though I was starting to dread the answer. "Employment records showing erratic work patterns, recordings of conversations where you allegedly admitted to taking what you deserve, and witness statements from people who observed your deteriorating mental state over the past several months." Sarah and I exchanged glances. "What witnesses?" "Let me see, statements from a Jeff Morrison at Hartwell Hardware, Dr. Patricia Martinez at General Hospital, and someone named Katie Anderson. Is that a relative?" "My sister." Mark had somehow gotten my own sister to provide a statement against me. "That's impossible," I said. "Katie would never." My phone buzzed with a text from Katie. "OMG, what's happening?" "Some FBI agent called asking about your mental state lately. I told them you'd been working too much and seemed stressed about money." "Was I not supposed to say that?" "Jesus Christ," Sarah muttered. "He used your own family against you. Probably called them pretending to be concerned about your welfare, got them to admit you'd been struggling financially." Rodriguez's radio crackled. "Detective, we've located Anderson's vehicle at Metropolitan Airport. Appears to be in long-term parking. Airport security is reviewing departure records now." "He's running," I breathed. "Or he wants us to think he is," Sarah corrected. "Everything else has been misdirection. The airport could be another false flag." Marcus was still on the line, his voice increasingly urgent. "Mrs. Anderson, there's something else. The court order includes a provision for immediate asset seizure if you're found to be at risk of fleeing the jurisdiction. If you so much as try to leave the state, it triggers additional federal charges." I was trapped. Mark had constructed an elaborate legal cage while I'd been working double shifts, and now every move I made would only tighten the bars around me. "How long do we have before the reversals are complete?" Sarah asked. 93 minutes, Marcus replied. "After that, Mrs. Anderson will be personally liable for all the debt while having no legal access to any funds. And if the psychiatric hold gets approved, she loses the right to make any financial or legal decisions for herself," Sarah finished grimly. Detective Rodriguez's phone rang. He answered tersely, then hung up with an expression that made my blood run cold. "Anderson never got on a plane," he said. Airport security found his car, but no record of him purchasing tickets or going through security. He ditched the car there to throw us off. Then where is he? I asked. Rodriguez's radio answered my question. All units, we have Mark Anderson's location. He's back at First National Bank with federal investigators and what appears to be a court-appointed psychiatrist. They're requesting immediate pickup of his wife for emergency mental health evaluation. The net was closing. The psychiatric hold order came through at exactly 8:47 a.m. Detective Rodriguez's radio crackled with the news that 2 officers were en route to take me into custody for a 72-hour mental health evaluation, based on Mark's sworn statement that I was an immediate danger to myself and others due to acute financial psychosis. Sarah, I said quietly, I need you to do something for me. She was frantically typing on her laptop, trying to file an emergency countermotion, but she looked up at my tone. What? I need you to call Dr. Martinez at the hospital. Tell her to pull Mark's employee health insurance records from when I added him to my plan 3 years ago. Specifically, tell her to look for any psychiatric medications or therapy sessions. Detective Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. You think he has a mental health history? I think someone who can plan financial fraud this elaborate while maintaining a perfect, concerned husband performance for over a year isn't exactly neurotypical, I said. And if he's been taking psychiatric medications while hiding it from me? Sarah's fingers flew over her phone. That would undermine his credibility as a witness to your mental state. If he's been treating his own psychological issues while documenting yours. 5 minutes later, Dr. Martinez called back. Sarah put her on speaker. I can't give you specific details over the phone, Dr. Martinez said carefully, but I can tell you that Mr. Anderson's insurance claims over the past 18 months paint an interesting picture. Monthly therapy sessions with Dr. Rebecca Walsh, she specializes in narcissistic personality disorder. And prescription fills for medications typically used to treat antisocial behavioral patterns. Can you testify to that? Sarah asked. In court? Absolutely. Especially since he's claiming his wife is mentally unstable while apparently receiving treatment for conditions that would make him unreliable as a witness to anyone else's mental state. Rodriguez was already on his radio, requesting that the psychiatric hold be delayed pending new evidence. But then his expression changed as he listened to the response. Too late, he said grimly. Federal investigators just got approval to freeze all assets and issue a warrant. They're treating this as an active financial crimes case with flight risk. That's when my phone rang one last time. Mark again. Hello, sweetheart, he said, sounding almost cheerful. I hear you're about to take a little vacation at St. Mary's Psychiatric Ward. Don't worry, I'll take good care of our finances while you get the help you need. But this time, I was ready for him. Mark, I said clearly, making sure Sarah's recording app caught every word, I want you to explain something to me. If you were so concerned about my mental health, why didn't you tell me you've been seeing Dr. Rebecca Walsh for narcissistic personality disorder? Why hide your own psychiatric treatment while documenting mine? The silence on the line stretched for 10 long seconds. I don't know what you're talking about, he said finally, but his voice had lost that confident edge. Insurance records don't lie, Mark. 18 months of therapy, prescription medications for antisocial behavior patterns, all while you were building your case against my supposed mental instability. That's... His voice was sharper now, more desperate. That's completely different. I was getting help to deal with your increasingly erratic behavior. Dr. Walsh was helping me understand how to support a spouse with financial anxiety disorder. Financial anxiety disorder isn't a real diagnosis, Mark. Another long pause. When he spoke again, the mask was finally slipping completely. You have no idea what you've done, he snarled. I spent months protecting us, building a future, planning for every contingency. You threw it all away because you're too stupid to understand basic financial strategy. There it is, Sarah whispered, grinning as her recording app captured every word. The federal investigators called off the psychiatric hold 23 minutes later.